transmit, process, and store information, providing a great gain in capacity and speed of information technology. And we have seen this photonics revolution happening around us for a very long time. And then the bubble burst for a little while, and people were trying to see what they can do with this wonderfully started technology. And they thought, oh, well, we can use photons in conjunction with biology and medicine, so we create something which we call biophotonics. So that's the science of generating and harnessing light to image, detect, and manipulate biological materials. And when we want to manipulate biological materials, we are talking down to resolution of single molecule. So biophotonics is used in biology to probe molecules, mechanisms with which they move or moved around the body and so on, functions and structure. And it's used in medicine to study tissue and blood at the macro and microorganism level, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that. Here we go. And it is used also to detect, diagnose, and treat diseases in a non-invasive way to the body. And I'll show you one example of that as well today. So biophotonics is great. I'm using very clean light. Light is in non-contact with anything, and we can do all this, perform all these diagnostic things and manipulate down to single molecule level. Okay, so the first question we are asking is, and you all know that, and if you know, nod your heads, so can light exert force? And of course, all of you know, yes, it can. I'm standing in a sunny day outside, I get hot, so that means energy has been transferred and there is a force acting on us. So we know that light carries energy, that's easy. And energy is Planck's constant times frequency of light, we all know that. It's a little bit more difficult to imagine that light carries momentum, but of course all you know that it does, because you have had enough courses about it. And the momentum of light is expressed as h over lambda, h over wavelength. The question is whether the transfer of momentum can be measured easily. So here are all my constants, and so assume a situation where light is being absorbed or reflected by an object. So then, of course, I have to conserve energy and momentum, so then momentum is then transferred to an object. So this is transfer of the momentum will be change in energy divided by c. It's all known from you for the first year of physics. So force acts on the object, and there is the simple force. I have the area of the object, and so I know that according to Newton's law, second law, the force acting on the object is delta T over delta T. Okay, and assume I have total absorption. Okay, so all the force is being absorbed, all the light is being absorbed by my object here. I have an area here over which this light is being absorbed. So I know that the force acting on the particle will be intensity of the light, or irradiance, times the area over which it is absorbed divided by speed of light. So this is all very well known from school and first year physics. So let us take an example and see how big forces we are talking about. So one example is, what is the force exerted on a person lying down in a bright sunlight? So it's quite a big body here. So the average power per unit area delivered by the sun is about 0.2 watt per square meter. So what will be the force? So I assume that the surface area is about 40 centimeters times 165. I wish I was that tall, but anyway. So what is the force? Can we move that across a bit? No. Okay, never mind. Okay, so the force then is equal to 0.2 times 0.4 times 1.65, So we see that the force acting on the body is of the order of 4 times 10 to minus 10 Newton. So we are not talking great forces here. Okay, so compare this force with the force needed to lift a person weighing 60 kilograms. So the force is then 588 Newton. So that was 4 times 10 to minus 10 versus 600 Newton. So we are talking, the forces that the light exerts are very, very small. So that's the lesson to take home with you. So we're talking about force. So how much force is needed to move a microscopic particle now? So obviously we saw that moving a big person around, we need a hell of a lot of force. So if I have microscopic particle or biological cell, for example, so how much force do I need to move the particle? So approximate a cell by a cube. So I take a cube being 2 times 10 to minus 6 meters squared, and the mass of about 10 to minus 15 kilograms. So the force due to the gravity would be 7 times 10 to minus 14 kilogram meter per second. Well, this is much smaller force. Okay, so the question is, if I have some sort of source of light, I might be able to do something with the source of light so that I will be able to exert this sort of forces on the tiny little particles. So obviously, if I were to look at the forces which were needed to move my huge heavy body around, that would be almost impossible or totally impossible. However, if we go to micro region with particles of the order of this size, 10 to minus 6 meters cubed, obviously we can see that those forces due to the gravity are very small. Okay, so average light intensity from the sunlight, we already said. So the question is, can I do it with sunlight? Okay, so the average intensity from sunlight is 0.2 watt per square meter. And so it's not even enough to move this microscopic particle around. So we need several orders of magnitude increase in intensity. So the question is, how can we do it? I will pose that question to you. However, I want to draw your attention to the fact that we did know about radiation pressure forces for a very, very long time. Kepler was talking about it already many, many years ago. And we can see here that light actually can exert force. And what we are looking here is a tail of a comet where it's built out of tiny dust particles of the order, the size of the order of what I was telling you about before. So therefore we can see that the sun is pushing the particles away. So we see that the tail is not perfectly straight, but it's bending away from the sun. We have radiation pressure acting on the tail of the comet. And that was intriguing people for a very long time, so I want to take you back long, long time ago. People were looking at, Nicholas and Paul have been looking, at measuring this radiation pressure force. Okay? So we are talking about these minute forces, and people set out from very early 1900s to try to find methods which will allow them to measure this sort of forces. So this experiment which I'm showing you here is a tension fiber, and then we have a mirror on one side and black disc on the other side, and then I have incident light coming onto the mirror. So the arrangement is such, is of torsion balance is such, that it was proposed by these two guys, and they were able to measure radiation pressure of this sort. So this is 5 times 10 to minus 6 Newton per meter square. And the idea here, of course, is that the light is bouncing off the mirror and transfers 2 times momentum to the whole shebang, and therefore the thing can start sort of torsionally turn a little bit, and they could identify how much it was and measure. So that was first measurement. So if I look how strong radiation pressure force is, if I have a laser, Hini laser, of average power of 10 milliwatt, I focus it to a spot which is one wavelength across in size, and I put it onto an object of the same diameter with density of 1 gram per centimeter to the third. And I assume now that particle is 10% reflective, so not 100% like a wood mirror, but 10%, and acts as a flat mirror, which is tough approximation. Then the momentum change of the laser each second would be 10 to minus 3 divided by 3 to 8 kilogram meters per second to minus 1. So if I have conservation of momentum, which we know we have to have, this will result in a force which is 10 to minus 12. So we're talking piconewton forces. So if I estimate the mass of the particle to be about this, so it's a density times pi lambda to the third, because we said that that was the size of my particle, then we can see that the acceleration on the particle of micron in size will be 5 to the 10th meter per second squared. That's fantastic, because what it tells us, it's more than 100 acceleration due to the gravity. Bingo, we have done it. We can use radiation pressure force to our liking. We can move things around. Well, not quite move yet, but we can influence our particles doing this. Okay, so what are we doing here? So what I want to do is to bring this light to be of the order of 1 wavelength in size across. So I want it to have diameter of about 1 wavelength in size. Normally I want nice, perfect Gaussian laser beam. And this is the profile of my laser beam. And there is my particle sitting in the beam. So if I have this sort of geometry and the particle is of a couple of microns in size, what we can see here that if I look at the rays of light, A and B, we can see what happens with them. So the ray A from my Gaussian laser beam goes into the particle, which is now thicker than its surrounding, so it has greater refractive index than the surrounding. And that means that we have Snell's law, which bends the beam towards the normal. And then when it comes to the other side of the particle, is bent up. Okay, so you can see what's happening with ray A, and that means that overall I have force FA acting on this particle in this direction. This ray A, because of being in that part of the Gaussian beam, has much more intensity than ray B. Okay, because you can see that the intensity here is much smaller than intensity in that part of the beam. So if I now follow in my ray regime, optics regime, I follow ray B, again it comes through to thicker medium, tends towards the normal, comes to the other side, goes out again, tends again. Right, so that means that I have force FB acting on it in the other direction. And if this force is larger than that force, because of the change in difference in the intensity of the beams, well, you tell me what happens. There will be a force acting, there will be a force acting on the particle to move it to the most intense part of the beam. So wherever the particle happens to be in this beam, it's drawn to the most intense part of the beam. And it's trapped there. Okay, so if I go again through what I said to you, if I'm working in a ray optics regime and looking at optical trapping, how it works, it's very, very, very simple. One assumption is that the particle that I'm trying to trap is thicker, has greater refractive index than surrounding. Okay? So, for example, I'm trapping latex beads in water. Okay? So latex beads will have refractive index of 1.5 and water 1.33. Okay, so this is thicker medium. I'm in ray optics regime, which means that my particle is huge in comparison with the wavelengths of light. So I can treat light as rays. So again, if I now have a situation, then the middle of the particle is, the middle of the particle is under the focal spot of my light. Then the particle, as you can see from this drawing, will be drawn upwards in the beam. Okay? Okay, and if the focused light is below the middle of the particle, you can see from the same argument that I had before, ray A comes in, is being bent, goes out, etc., that if I look at the balance of forces, then the particle will be drawn to the most intense part of the beam. So whether it's above, below, or to the side, it will be drawn to the most intense part of the beam. So that means that overall, I can trap this particle and move it around. If I move my beam or if I move my microscope slide, which I'll show you in a minute. If we want to be more precise here, we can say the following, that if I'm working in ray optics regime, this is pretty good model. However, if my particle is much, much smaller than the wavelength of light, then this approximation of ray optics is killed and we cannot use it. So we have to use the force on a point dipole. So here are my point dipoles sitting in the laser beam. So again, this orange thing is the profile of my Gaussian beam with most of the intensity in the middle. So the field maximum is in the middle. So in the region of the dipole, the electric field strength is reduced. So that's my strength. And the minimum energy configuration when the dipole is in the strongest part of the field, I'm saying. So that means that if I want minimum, so conserve energy in the best possible way. The particle will be drawn, even if it's very small, it will obviously be drawn to the very middle of the beam. And again, by manipulating either of those, we can trap particles in 3 dimensions. So what it means really is that we can trap big particles, small particles. But the world is not that nice really, because normally what we are working with in optical tweezers is in between these 2 regimes. So our particles are of the order, majority of them, not all, but of the order of the wavelength of light or slightly bigger. So they are not small enough to be treated with EM theory easily, and they are not big enough to be treated with a ray optics regime. And I'll show you a little bit later what we can do about that. And summarizing this overhead, I would say that the force results from exchange of momentum with the beam. And the forces we are talking about are of the order of piconewton, as I showed you before with my little calculation. So if I have a particle of the order of 1 micron, the forces are between hundreds of piconewtons down to hundreds of femtonewtons. And we'll look at all those sorts of forces. Okay, so in summary, what I have told you up to now is that I can take light and I can pick up and move simple molecules using light. So this is an artist impression taken from Professor Kishan Dolakia's lab, where he's saying, okay, we have our optical tweezers. This is very, very false image, because obviously we do not have any mechanical tweezers. Neither do we put any mechanical tweezers to shine in the light to trap anything. But this is artist's impression about what optical tweezers is all about. So basically what I want to do is to use light to catch the particle of a given size, move it around in 3 dimensions, X, Y, and Z. But on top of it, what I also want to do, which I told you nothing about up to now, is to be able to rotate it, and we'll see why I want to do that. So, in summary, what I want to do, I want to create laser tweezers, laser scissors, which I'll show you later in the 2nd or 3rd lecture. We'll see how we go. So that means cut things using laser light. Laser catapult, and it's not a joke. It's not a joke. We will not talk about it a lot, but I can mention it. And laser screwdriver, which means take the particle and turn it around. And optical spanner, which means I want to also, while turning the particle around, I want to be able to measure optical torque imposed on the particle. Okay, so this is the measurement which I'm showing you, that not only do I want to screw this screw in, but as I'm doing it, I want to measure it continuously without any other means but light. So this is what all my lectures will be about, and they will carry me through to the notion of optically driven micro machines and nice things like that. Okay, so the outline is tell you a little bit more about optical tweezers, few principles behind it, examples of applications, force measurement using Brownian motion for specific applications to look at adhesion, and then switch to rotating particles and use them for microreology. And I want to measure, as I said, I want to measure optical torque. And then I want to come to different ways of measuring optical torque. And as we go through, I would like to be able to convince you that I eventually can construct micron size optically driven micro machine, which have some practical use. Okay, so that's the aim of the day. So this is, I want to construct micro machines and combine them with microfluidics. You heard a little bit from Professor Hurd today about their microfluidics, and so we want to combine the 2 technologies and see how we go about that. Okay. So again, back to optical tweezers to summarize what we just said before. So if you fell asleep before for a little time, well, you can wake up now and get it again. Okay, so basically what we are talking about is it makes use of small momentum of light to move things around. Okay, and so I have my body here, and it's illuminated by light which carries h bar k of momentum, and it can be either reflected, so let us see that it's reflected. So then there will be force acting on my particle, which is twice the size, which is 2h bar k. So how does it look in the trap? So this is highly focused laser beam, and if I move my beam, you can see that the particle moves move always to the most intense part of the beam. This phenomenon has been very widely studied by a lot of people. It was started by Arthur Ashkin from IBM many, many years ago. And what can it do? Well, hell of a lot. It can, it's very simple in principle, and a combination of measurements and theory can give us very powerful tool. And typically what we are talking about, as I said before, is that a 10 milliwatt laser, which means 10 gigawatt per square meter laser, will give me forces of about 1 piconewton per milliwatt if the particle is 1 micron in size. Okay, so that's the principle, and we've gone through this. So what is optical force we are talking about here? So the optical force that we are talking about is refractive index times power of the laser divided by the speed of light times the efficiency factor, optical efficiency factor. This is then balanced, so all the traffic is done in liquid medium. So then this force will be balanced by the drag force, and you know the Stokes drag force is given by 6 pi eta times size of the, so this is viscosity of the liquid, size of the particle, and the maximum speed with which we'll be moving the particle. So if these two forces, if these two forces are now equal to each other, so the drag force is counteracting the optical force, then we say that this expression is equal to this expression, and we can calculate the efficiency factor for the traffic. So the efficiency factor will be inversely proportional to power and inversely proportional to the refractive index and proportional to the size of the particle that we are trapping and proportional, directly proportional to the maximum speed with which we can move the particle. And that's multiplied by viscous drag. Okay, so what it tells me now is that if I can do it, I can take a body, catch it in optical tweezers, apply a force, and then drag it with my laser beam or the table of the optical tweezers, which I'll show you in a minute, and see where the particle will fall out of the trap. Then we will know when this balance exactly occurs, what's the maximum speed with which I can drag the particle till it falls off. And then it means that I can characterize, for example, how far I have moved the particle from the trap. Okay? So if I move it slightly, it means that the position of the particle in the beam will change. If I look, for example, in reflected light, I might be able to measure that. Okay, so optical tweezers in principle is very simple piece of equipment. You can build it for very little. You just need a laser and few optical components, or an old microscope and a laser and few lenses, and you can have optical tweezers with which you can play. You can't do much with it, but you can at least do 3-dimension trapping. So what do we need? We basically need the laser beam with certain power, and as you could see, we didn't need much power. 10 milliwatts will do. For other applications, we need a little bit more. Then we need to shape the beam a little bit more, because what I told you before was that I want to have the smallest possible spot at the focal point in my microscope. So in order to achieve that, those of you who have done a little bit of microscopy know that I have to overfill the objective slightly, so that I use the largest incident angles for the beam, and then I will get the sharpest focus in the focal spot of the laser. So 2 lenses, objective. The objective has to be high numerical aperture. Why high numerical aperture? Because I want these beams to go, as I said, to as sharp focus as possible. And then my sample, and then microscope slide which moves back and forth, and some sort of viewing system. So this is what we have here. We have a laser here, and then we have a hell of a lot of optical elements, which I'll tell you about more. But here we can see objectives. So this objective is here. This is the optical table, that one, and on this we have a sample. And then we can see the camera here, and we can have other detectors if we want, and we'll go through that in a minute. But this is the simplest of all setups possible. And with this setup, I can trap particles in 3 dimensions. So X, Y, Z. So can trap and manipulate high index particles in water, and as I said, the forces we are talking about is about 1 piconewton per milliwatt power. Okay, but this is not all. Sometimes we want to do other tricks for optical tweezers, so that means that I will be employing other elements in my optical tweezers, like, for example, a half-wave plate or quarter-wave plate, and you might ask, why would you need that? Well, this will be needed when I will be wanting to introduce rotation to my optical tweezers, so instead of only transferring linear momentum, which we already know how to do, if I want to transfer angular momentum of light, I might need these devices. So you know often that lambda over 4 plate, if I have linearly polarized light and I have lambda over 4 plate in the setup, the transmitted light will be then circularly polarized. So it will have 1 h-bar orbital angular momentum or spin angular momentum. And then what I can do is that I can introduce some other fancy beam of lights, which carry angular momentum of other sort, and I'll be telling you about that. So the whole idea is put it in the setup as well and see what sort of other beams you will get, and we'll come to it in my later lectures. So it's very easy to modify the setup, and also what we can do is, instead of only watching the light which is being scattered from the particle in my camera, I can also use to detect the light which is transmitted through my particle, because particles are often mostly transmitted. So they maybe absorb 5% of light or maybe 10% of light. So there is a possibility of looking at the detection of transmitted light, and we'll come to that later. So this gives me much more a flexible setup, and I can put other detectors into it and so on, and we'll be looking at it a little bit later. Okay, and then I will also show you that we can do tricks with little optical microelements to change the beams of light that we are imparting on our particles, but that will come much later. Okay, so again, summarizing, so nobody goes to sleep, optical trapping, beam of light comes in, I have my particle which acts like the lens, so it's approximately acting like the lens. So it's being pushed, okay? Energy momentum being conserved, and it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Done something. Okay, so we move it further and further, and then it's in the most intense part. So this is for one beam of light, and then if I make the light to be highly convergent, okay, I have very strong focus here, and what happens then is that the particle is being pushed to the most intense part of the beam. Okay, so it goes to the most intense part of the beam. So that's what we said. Ah, it works. Okay, we got it. Alright, so I'm doing something wrong because of that. Okay, so we all agree that wherever the particle is, it just jumps into this most intense part of the beam. Right, so let us see how it looks. I have 2 micron sized particle polystyrene sphere in optical tweezers. And what I'm doing here is I'm manipulating the stage of the microscope. So I'm moving it in XY direction, and you can see that this particle here gets trapped. Other particles are moving around, and actually is so much force that it sometimes will trap 2 particles, but you see that this one is staying put. It jiggles around with Brownian motion. Now it was kicked out, another one comes in. But you can see that it's really, really trapped. So we can go quite fast with our microscope stage, and the particle gets trapped, stays trapped. So what we also can do is that instead of moving the microscope stage, we can now move the beam of light. So instead of moving microscope stage, I am moving the beam of light. So here is the particle, again, 2 microns in size, being trapped, and I'm moving laser beam in X, and I will move it in Y. And you can see it's a bit jerky movement because we are doing it by hand, but you can see that it's very, very strongly trapped. You can also see that these other particles which are not trapped jiggle around. That's called Brownian motion, right? This particle jiggles a little bit, but much less, depending on the strength of the trap, it doesn't jiggle very strongly. Okay, so what is it all good for? I can manipulate organelles inside cell, and I'm not quite sure whether you can see it very well, but here is my trapped organelle, and there is the mess in the cell, so this is a living cell, and I basically go through this maze, and I will try to get this trapped organelle to absolutely different position in the cell. So obviously this is just a game being played by one of my students to show how good he is in manipulating using optical tweezers. But obviously if you can do that, you can probe insides of the cell depending on its properties. And you can see that we can move this particle very long way away from the place where we trapped it. So it was originally trapped over there, and now it's at the other end of the cell. So this is a very powerful tool in order to access bits and pieces of the cell and do something with them, which are needed for diagnostics or whatever it happens to be. So that's very powerful tool. Okay, so go up. That's enough of this film. It was very clever. Okay, so what I want to do now is to tell you a little bit more physics behind the laser trap. So basically, sorry, we go back. So basically what we are dealing with, if we are talking about optical tweezers, is that I have a particle trapped in a harmonic potential trap. So this is supposed to be my harmonic potential here. This is my trapped particle. And depending how much force I have on my, how much power I have in my tweezers, this will be deeper or shallower harmonic trap. Okay? The particle is trapped and it jiggles with Brownian motion within the trap a little bit. So this is supposed to show the Brownian motion. So again, this is how it looks. And we saw it already, but just to convince you again, you can see here the particle is trapped. Before it's trapped, it jiggles a lot. When it's trapped, it's almost stiff. And the question is, and of course we can move it around, and we said it already, and the question is it really, really stiff in the potential, or is it jiggling just much less than non-trapped particles? And you can see that this one is jiggling really a lot, and the trapped one wasn't. And so if we plot time sequence of the average displacement of the particle, follow the particle with very fast camera, this is what you will see. And in principle, you can follow this very, very precisely. And so, if you then want to look at the dynamics of the trap, you could also look at the frequency dependence, the power spectrum density dependence upon the frequency, and you can see the very typical behavior of the trap. Namely, here the particle is very heavily trapped, so at low frequencies, which you see here, the particle stays in the trap very stably, and then we have this roll-off frequency where the particle is characterized by 1/f2 dependence, and then it falls out of the trap. So typical setup, which is a little bit more technical than what I showed you before, is that I have my microscope with microscope slide and high numerical objective here, and I have my CCD camera and sort of illumination from below, and then I bring my trapping laser. Normally we are using neodymium laser, which is 1064 nanometers wavelength. It will become clear why we do it. I can tell you now that it has to do with biological applications of optical tweezers, because we don't want the light which is trapping the particles to be absorbed by the particle, and infrared light of this wavelength is very little absorbed in those particles. Okay, and then on top of that we can also add another laser, and this other laser which I'm adding into this setup is HEVI laser, so it's red laser, very, very, very weak but incredibly stable. And what I do here is I send this laser along the same path as my trapping laser, and this is the laser I will use eventually to look at the trapping. No. Okay, I thought I had another thing there. Okay. Okay, sorry. Okay, so what I will do here is basically that I will trap the particle in 3 dimensions when the infrared beam goes to the focus where the particle will be located, and using this red laser I will be then able to monitor where in the trap the particle is. And if the particle is slightly moving out of the trap, well, if I have clever arrangement here for the detection of the red laser, so you can see that the red laser is transmitted through the objective, captured by the set of lenses here, is put, the red laser is redirected by the beam splitter to quadrant photodetector, and on quadrant photodetector, if the particle moves slightly from the position of the maximum intensity as it was before, I can notice it on my quadrant detector. So if I want to characterize the trap even further, well, I can do it using Lorentz-Smith scattering theory. I told you before. So I give you a couple of slides now on proper theory of optical tweezers. That means the theory which can be used when the particle is approximately the same size as the focus focal beam. And this theory is called the Lorentz-Smith scattering theory. So we are looking here at calculations which are done for the force on an object which is 0.5 lambda. So the beam propagates here in positive z direction, and convergence angle is 60 degrees. So this is pretty high numerical aperture objective as we wanted to have. So I don't have a plane wave coming onto the particle, but it's highly focused wave coming onto the particle. And the refractive index is 1.55 is the particle, and 1.33 is the surrounding. So what you can see here is that if the particle is below the focus, well, it's pretty much drawn into the focus spot, as we said before, and it has to do with the fact that the particle, as I said, acts as a lens. So if we take it into the side here, and to the right of the focus, you can see that the light is bending, as we were describing with our ray optics model. So it wasn't such a bad model. And you can see that again, in that situation, it will be again drawn to the most intense particle. And those calculations agree very well with our measurements. So what does modeling of optical tweezers do? It allows us to simulate for a variety of conditions, and typical parameters are the refractive index and radius, and our code allows rapid calculations, and we can calculate for a large range of particles, and so we can decide on a trapping landscape. Okay, so here is my trapping landscape. So I have optical tweezers, and I want to determine what sort of sizes of particles to use for what. I can use this graph in order to decide what sort of particle to use. And I already told you that all my previous movies were for the particle which was about 2 microns in size. And you can see here why I was using particle which was 2 microns in size, because you can see that the trapping was very strong in this part of the diagram. So if I use 1 or 2 or 3 micron sized particle, you can see that the trapping is very good if the refractive index is 1.6, 1.5, and we said it was 1.55. So the trapping is very good. However, if I were to trap diamond particle, which has a refractive index of 2.4, you could see that I could be in real trouble if I don't choose the size of the particle very carefully, because at some places there's no trapping whatsoever. So this is pretty interesting. We got very excited about it, but you could ask, why would you bother to trap diamond particles? Well, we will come to trapping very high index particles a little bit later. But anyway, what it gives you is very good map of calculating where the trapping will be the best. And this is in the other direction, so this is in Z direction where the trapping is much weaker. But again, what you can see here is that if I'm trapping particles which have refractive index around 1.4055, which is my typical latex or polystyrene bead, or a cell which has refractive index of about the same in water or in buffer solution, then obviously if I have particle which is of the order of 2 micron in size, the trapping is very easy and very efficient. So that's the model. Okay, so now I want to switch gears to...
maybe it's a good time.
Okay, to gray. Okay.
Okay, are there some questions?
refractive index of the particle. And the numerical refractive index of the beam.
It has to be slightly lower.
But if you have the expression for force, you have only the index of the particle.
Well, it's actually the difference between the index, that's combination between refractive index of the water and of the particle. Well, this is N1 plus N2 divided by N1 minus N2 divided by N1 plus N2. So there is a combination of the two refractive indices. Yeah?
Yeah, what is the basic difference between optical tweezers and laser tweezers?
Say it again. What's the difference between optical tweezers and laser tweezers? None. There are
Yeah,
two
then
names.
why we call it like, because we are using laser only for tweezing in optics.
Well, it's sort of trademark to say optical tweezers, okay? And then people started to say laser tweezers. So it's the same thing. So often people, optical tweezers might mean both tweezers and scissors, while laser tweezers means only tweezers, like in catching particles and moving them in 3 dimensions. The other one can include scissoring, which means making holes in things.
Then this laser cooling is also associated with this.
Yes, very good. Laser cooling is very much associated with that. If you want to cool atoms, you are using gradient force in very similar way to the very first slide that I showed you.
Like in fountain clock, cold atoms are used.
I'm sorry?
You know that the laser fountain clock.
When a laser quantum fountain clock, yes, the laser cooling is
Yeah,
used. Yes.
But that is also like tweezing action.
There are experiments in quantum atom optics which involve laser tweezers for transfer of atom cloud or BEC from place to another. Yeah?
More questions?
Can you give some detailed explanations about when the particle is trapped by the index, the refractive index of the particles is not enough, but still you have some special size which connects the particle trapped by the.
Okay, all right. That's a very good question. You mean my
Because
landscape?
in my experience,
You are talking about this?
Yeah. If the refractive index is large enough, really I can't observe any trapping effect. But still, you have some very special size.
Well, these are interference effects. It's a very good question. These are interference effects, and you can see that those interference effects for the particles which are normally trapped, that is particles, polystyrene or latex beads, which have refractive index of 1.55, you will not see any of these effects. So you will trap easily. Okay, and the trapping will only depend upon the depth of your harmonic potential. Okay, so you trap better the stronger the trap, right? But as I said, if you were to go to refractive index, which is much greater, you can see that certain places will give you better trapping than others. Right? That's all this graph is going to say. So for majority people who are using optical tweezers, you never bother about that. What I'm showing is how clever we are that we can calculate it.
In this picture, refractive index is again combination?
No, here the refractive index is, I'm sorry for the confusion, I'll take it into account and change my slides. This is refractive index of the particle. But of course, the other refractive index is assumed to be something. 1.33. No, I'm not trapping in vacuum. I'm trapping in water. You could, in principle, trap in vacuum, and people have done that, but this is not in vacuum. So these calculations do not apply to vacuum. This is water. 1.33. And then the refractive index of the particle, which is trapped virus. And there was a question there. Yes. Very good question. There are thermal effects, and they can be very weak. There is a lot of studies have been made about thermal effects in optical tweezers. And basically, if you use 1064 end cells or latex beads, the thermal effect is tiny. very small. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it's so small that obviously people have tried to show that cells will survive, and they do survive. Okay? So the heating is very small. However, if you use some other type of material, which I will show later, where the light is being absorbed, then obviously thermal effects are great.
There's some gradient between from one and another side, particle position.
The gradient, thermal gradient.
Temperature.
Yes, there is, but it's so little that you can almost neglect it. Depending on situation, obviously. But if I take normal latex bead or polystyrene bead, it's all right. It's 5 degrees by in 100 milliwatts or something, or even less than that.
What was the name of the organelle on the video where the organelle was present?
Macrophage.
Oh, what is the name of the organelle?
Or the name of the organ, wouldn't have a clue. There's something within the cell. And if you talk to my friends biologists, they said that macrophages eat dirt. So macrophage is quite a large cell, which very often its membrane can open and sort of engulf dirt from outside. This is how they feed themselves, and they get this stuff into the cell. So it could have been, I think, it was an organelle, but my biology friends tell me that it might have been dirt. But this was just an example. People in many labs have actually manipulated organelles within the cells.
Okay, just one more question, because we'll need to do the photo during this break.
So this is a combined effect of gradient forces and scattering.
Yes.
So it would, if we trap at different wavelength,
this will be different.
It would
Absolutely.
Be different.
Yes, absolutely right. So actually
so
on
this
my...
is at 1064.
That was 1064. So actually on our website we have the optical toolbox, so you can go and change all the parameters, refractive indices, wavelengths of light and whatever, and see how this landscape will look.
Okay, let us thank our speaker and it's now time for the group photo. Please follow me and Sailing to the location where we'll take the photo.
No, also we need this one. This one.
I can measure escape force by looking at viscous drag when I move the stage. I can also do force calibration of detector signal by looking at position-sensitive detector, and one of them was this quadrant detector where my red laser beam was moving along the detector to 4 quadrants, and as it was creating imbalance, I could measure where the particle was. So that was very easy doable. And then I can measure viscous drag, which applies force. And then I can also do measurement of position and track stiffness by looking at Brownian motion or position and also do position calibration. And the big thing about this is that really Brownian doesn't want to work. Okay, here we go. So the Brownian motion in the particles which are not trapped looks like this. So this is a set of particles which just are being watched by a very fast camera, and then you can analyze the movement of those particles, and I showed it to you before. And you can, by applying a trap to a given particle, you can then see how the Brownian motion is changing, and that will give you a lot of information. So here what I'm showing you is that you can measure how stiff the trap is by doing several things, and one of them is, so I'm taking a spectrum, power spectrum, of a particle in the trap. So it's a particle of certain size, and unfortunately I haven't written how big this particle is, so let's assume it's 2 microns. And I'm trapping it, and I'm applying a power of 10 milliwatts. And what you can see as I'm going up in frequency, the particle it sort of has this 1 over F2 fall off, which is very good. That's the measurement of Brownian motion. And you can see that the part which is playing here, where the particle is very stably trapped, is very little. However, if I go to the power of 633 milliwatts, so many times bigger power, you can see that I can go to much higher here and the particle stays trapped. So the particle stays trapped and then falls out of the trap. So you can see that the stiffness here is not very large, and this is very large stiffness of the particle. Okay, and then we can look at the position detection, and again what we're seeing here is the position calibration. I take 2 micron sized stearine particle or polystearine particle, and I scan it over the detection range. So I have my quadrant detector with the red laser which is following the particle, and we are plotting signal in X direction, and this is in Y direction. So this is X versus Y, and this is Z versus Y. And so you can see that there is very nice profile where the particle is very, very stably trapped in this position, and then it gives us the span of the parameters within which, with a certain power, for a certain size of particles, we can do our calibration. Applications now, just a few little things to show you. Trapping of macrophage. So I take this big cell that we had before. I don't know how visible it is on this screen. Is something happening? Something is visible, but not very much. Okay, so the particle, so now I have quite huge particle here, and I trap it in one single laser beam, and the particle is following my laser, staying in the laser beam, and you can see that other particles flow away, and now 2 are trapped in the laser trap, 1 is being kicked out, and so on and so forth. So you would say, what is it good for? Well, I can take this particle, this particular cell, if I want it for DNA analysis or something of the sort, I can collect them in a given place, and then play with them for DNA analysis and so on, in very precise way of choosing particles which really appeal to me, or which I really want to have. And another thing which I'm showing you here is, is a little experiment where here somebody asked me how I know, you asked me how I know that there were organelles. Okay, so here, whoops, here is a good example. Okay. So here's a good example of doing something really within the cell. So I have spinach cell, and within this spinach cell I have chloroplasts. Those chloroplasts are little sort of oblong things here. And I can move them around. If you follow the arrow here, you can see that I'm moving them around. So I'm within the cell is alive, I concentrate my laser beam, which is non-absorptive, and I catch the chloroplast, and I can move it around. And you might ask, what is it good for? Very often, again, you want to actually, in this study, what we were interested in is to see what is the shape of a chloroplast which is still alive. Very often what people do is that they do slices of the cell, spinach cell, they put it under an electron microscope, which has tremendous resolution, and they look at it. Well, this is a bit tough, because the cell is actually dead when you put it under the transmission electron microscope. So here, this is intact cell with a chloroplast which is intact, and you're looking in vivo at the shape of the chloroplast. And we were able to establish that the shape of the chloroplast was a little bit like a saucer. Okay, so it wasn't round and it wasn't flat, but it was sort of bent slightly upwards. Okay, so that's one application. Now I mentioned that I will tell you about medical applications. So there's something which we call optical stretcher. So basically it's a little bit different to what I was describing right now, up to now, because what happens here is that I have a fiber and another fiber, so these are 2 optical fibers, which, where the light is coming out of it, it gets quite big very quickly, but I have 2 fibers which are collinear, and I have laser light coming through both of them, so they build, combining the 2, builds a trap in 2 dimensions. So there is laser beam coming out like this, and a laser beam coming towards it again, and so therefore in the middle of it I can trap something 2-dimensional. And then if I vary the power of one of the lasers, and if the sample is soft, I will elongate it. Okay, so if this all of a sudden the power of this laser is being changed, then the particle, the object will elongate itself. And then we can study how soft this object is. But another thing we can do with something like, so this is the study. So here I have my 2 fibers. I bring the particle in between the fibers. I trap it 2-dimensionally, and you can see that if the power in the 2 lasers is exactly the same, it's around blood cell, and then if it's a little bit imbalanced between the two, we can elongate the cell, and then if we compare it very carefully, depending on the power which we are applying to the both sides of the cell, what we can then see is how elastic the cell is. And there are a lot of studies which show that elasticity of the cell has a lot to do with the health of the cell. So the healthy cell has elasticity of some measure, and the cancerous cell, for example, has very different elasticity. And this sort of diagnostics is becoming usable already. There is a group in Cambridge of Jochen Gluck which has shown that they get very reproducible results. So this is quantitative analysis of very simple optical stretching. Okay, and then next one is again a little bit of a game here, but it's not only a game. So this is optical stretcher, and I have a particle in the optical stretcher, and then I change the distance between the two fibers. You can see the particle dances back and forth as I'm changing the power, and then I can use it together with tweezers. So I go in, I take it with tweezers, I put it in, and I make all sorts of things with it, building a total necklace out of it. And the funny thing is that so we're still doing it, and we can bring plenty of them in between the fibers. And then if I play with the power in the two fibers, you will see it in a minute. Come on. Then we can make them go apart and come together again. Here we go. We are dancing back and forth together in unison, and then changing the power, I can play with them as I like. So you might say, okay, what is it good for? Well, studies of colloidal solutions are aided by that very, very much, and a lot of very exciting studies of that sort have been made. And here's another example of it. So this is again stretcher, and the particles are going in and out of it, and they dance in unison or separately, and so on. Okay. Now, I mentioned at the very beginning that optical tweezers, question from this side, it was optical tweezers or laser tweezers. Okay, so we can have laser and micro manipulation, okay, and I can have tweezers and scissors. Okay, so what do I mean by it? If I now, where's the girl who asked about the effects, the thermal effects? Okay, so now imagine that I have blue laser, which is totally absorbed in a certain part of the cell. If it's absorbed, the heat develops, and I kill the thing. I blow it up, right? So imagine now that I have a chromosome carrying some sort of disease, and I go with laser scissors, focus it very, very strongly where the chromosome is, and fire it for a very short period of time. Heat develops. I use the heat here, or shock wave. It's more shock wave than the heat, and we can talk about it during the break. And so I kill this chromosome. And actually, a group in Irvine in California has shown many years ago that when you kill this chromosome in a living cell, when the cell divides, the killed chromosome does not multiply. So you can now go to fairyland, to dreamland, and say, okay, let us combine tweezers and scissors. Let the cell have illness, which is very difficult to cure otherwise. We know by which chromosome it's carried. I kill the chromosome using scissors. I have immobilized the cell by using tweezers. Then I kill the chromosome, and then I take another pair of tweezers and scissors, and I drill a hole in the membrane of the cell. With tweezers, I bring the chromosome, which is beautiful and healthy one, and I put it into the cell. So we can have a lot of joy using tweezers and scissors for diagnostic purposes, but also the healing purposes. Has it been done? Not yet. You might be the one to do it. Okay, we can fuse cells. Okay, so I can take, you can use scissors to cut the tail off, so you make it less wiggly. And then you can catch the head and move it around with optical tweezers. And the idea of in vitro fertilization, which didn't include any instrumentation other than light, is that it's very clean and it has great success rate. And basically you take an egg, and imagine that you have an egg here, you trap it using optical tweezers, you use scissors to make a little hole in the membrane of the egg, and you take your tweezers, trap the sperm, and put it into the egg. And that experiment actually is not science fiction. It has been done many times. Success rate is great. The mice embryos did survive. They weren't heated or destroyed. Well, I don't know what sort of mice was born, but anyway, the fertilization did take place. And so this is very, very clean way of doing this sort of stuff. Okay, and then you can do studies of individual nucleosomes. So we are still using transfer of linear momentum of light. So basically what we see here is optical tweezers. That's the center of the optical tweezers, and I have my RNA here, or DNA, which is attached on one end to a microsphere, and on the other end, it's attached to microscope slide. And I use my microscope slide to stretch the DNA, and I'm looking at the forces which are involved in it by monitoring how much this particle moves from the equilibrium position. So I have my detector up here, and if this particle is a quadrant detector, and if this particle is moving from the equilibrium position, I can see how much it moves. And clever people can do it down to 4 angstrom, 4 times 10 to minus 10 meters displacement. So it's not bad. Okay, and what we have done in our lab is studies of adhesion. So again, it was quite an interesting study. I cannot go on a tangent all the time because I have so much material that I'll be stuck very soon. But anyway, so the study here was the following. Our biologist friends have discovered that if you inoperate plastic tubing into perennial cavity of an animal and then eventually human being, you can produce on this, the reaction of the body, the immune system reacts in such a way that it builds a layer of cells around this plastic. If you let this plastic, a certain type of plastic, stay in the perennial cavity for about a couple of weeks, then the plastic will be covered with a sock, like a tuberous, which is composed of cells of the body, and it's very strong. You can operate out this plastic, turn it like taking a sock off your leg, and you've got a tubing which is quite long, about 15 centimeters, and it can be new artery. So it has been shown that if you grow it that way, in the body of the person who needs the operation, or of the animal, mammal, whatever, who needs the operation, then the body doesn't reject that new material because it was grown in its own body. It has been proven that it's very strong. It has been proven that it stays there forever and it's not rejected. A lot of operations like that have been done on dogs. So you could say, what is she on about? Why tweezers? Well, the thing is that they want to grow it fast. They want to know what sort of materials. They want to know what we all want to know what shall we let this person in? Here we go. And we also want to establish what the mechanism depends upon so that we can grow it much faster. So what we are doing here is that we have a macrophage, which is the cell which adheres to this plastic material, and then we have our plastic materials, and we vary these materials. So we have beads which are made of different types of plastic. And what we want to measure is what is the onset of adhesion, how strong is that adhesion when it takes place. So what I will do is that I will bring my particle trapped in optical trap onto this macrophage. And then, I do it the other way around actually. I trap this particle and I have this macrophage on the microscope slide, so I bring them together. And here they adhere, and you can see that there is a little bit of pull before it comes free. And what I want to do is to measure that adhesion force using optical tweezers. So this is how it works. So this is my particle in the optical trap, and I know its position, and then I bring my macrophage in. The particle goes out of the equilibrium position, and then it breaks. And I want to measure how strong this force was. And so this is the setup. I will skip going through it. It's not very interesting, but it's very good, of course. And the whole idea of that, let me go back, here she goes again, is that I can measure very, very precisely this displacement of the trapped particle in the trap. So that's the major thing here. Okay, so here it is. If the particle does not get adhered to the macrophage, okay, it comes towards the macrophage, more light being scattered, it goes out, nothing happens. It goes to its equilibrium position. But if adhesion takes place, what happens is that we see this very change like here, so this is just scattered light, but then we see the slope here. And when it comes to this place, all of a sudden it's broken. So if I know the slope, if I can measure what's happening along the lines of this, I will know how strong adhesion force is. And this is the measurement. So touch, stretch, and here it breaks. And what we see here is that I didn't have a single bond, but I had 3 bonds. And I can measure them. I have to assume some sort of a model here, simple model. What we are showing you here is the simplest of models you can imagine, and the red is the theory, and the blue is the experiment. So we are very proud when we publish this. So we can measure the adhesion forces. And biologists, and we can see how strong those forces are. So here is the measurement of the forces. And biologists said, to start with, when we tried to publish it, they said, you didn't measure 10,000 times, so we don't do it. But eventually we did. Okay, so anyway, so this is a method which allows you to measure forces in a very specific way. Okay, and there is a rupture force as well. So we can characterize everything is happening between the cell and the thing. Okay, so we skip that. Okay, so with that, linear momentum is understood. You're all happy, you know how to do it. So what I want to do now is rotation. Why? Because it's fun, but it's also usable. So I'll try to convince you about that. So now I want to go to my second part. So it's laser screwdriver. So as I turn the particle, I want to measure the force. An optical spanner, I want to turn it around just in order to be able to look at it from different directions. And then I want to measure the torque which is applied. So the question is, how do we do it? If I have Gaussian beam and I illuminate polystyrene bead, you didn't see any rotation, did you? I didn't, anyway. So we have to do something either to our particles, have asymmetric particles, and if I can draw your attention to the first application that I showed you just a few minutes ago, of a macrophage being trapped, it wasn't perfectly round, and it was sort of twisted in the beam. Because it was symmetric, it wasn't a symmetric particle, it was asymmetric particle. So I can do that. And I can use special laser beams, and I would like to show you that. And you can also use multiple traps, because you can have an object which you trap in 2 traps. And now if I want to turn it, I can easily turn it by making power in one of them bigger than in the other, and they will turn. And people have done a lot of it. But I don't want to turn things like that. I want to have one beam, or special particle and a beam, and I want to be able to turn them and measure optical power. Okay. So here are the examples about which I will be talking. And this is all from our lab. So here we have calcite crystal, which we build in the lab. Here is elongated particle in elliptical beam. So this is a glass rod, which is about 10 micron long and 1 micron long, half micron in diameter. Here is a very special particle which I proudly will talk about, Vatterite particle, which rotates so fast that it rotates liquid around it. And here are the two particles in very special hollow beam, which carries orbital angular momentum. So this is pretty nice. I quite like that one. And it can go as fast as, well, this one can go as fast as 500 Hertz. Pretty good. Okay. So what I want to do is to twist and turn as well as push and pull. So a spanner and optical tweezer. I want to do everything at once. Okay? I want to do it by no demand because I'm all the time after quantitative measurements. I mean, it's nice to show those films, but you are wanting to measure something as well. And then I want to look at use of spin angular momentum. So for example, you know from your first year courses or secondary courses in physics that if I have circling polarized light, right, it has spin angular momentum of 1 h bar, either in this direction or in opposite sense, right? So it's 1 h bar per photon. I can also look at another type of angular momentum, and it is orbital angular momentum. And the question is how to do that. And here we go. So I want to use angular momentum for that. Spin is easy, and orbital angular momentum is slightly more complicated. So this is electromagnetic wave, and you must remember this from your Hecht or whatever book you use. So this is electric field vector, which is making a spiral, right? And it's a left-handed or right-handed circularly polarized light, and it carries 1 h bar angular momentum per photon. Now, of course, in my beams, I will have a lot of photons. And then I can use orbital angular momentum. So this is fancy-looking beam, and I will tell you a little bit about this fancy-looking beam. It's called Gauss-Laguerre 05 beam. And we will look at it in a little bit more details, but I will show you that as far as this fancy beam is concerned, it will carry plus or minus a LH bar per photon of orbital angular momentum, and this L is here. So in this case, for this fancy looking beam, so it's a beam which is sort of carries, the pointing vector is going around like a spiral. And depending what's the charge of this beam, which is this number here, this will carry more or less orbital angular momentum. So let us look at easy stuff first. So this is circularly polarized Gaussian beam. So this was puzzling people for a very long time. So as early as 1934, Beth has done original experiment on measuring spin angular momentum. So what he had torsion pendulum, and he had an aluminium ladder here, and he had certain amount of light coming onto it, and then he had birefringent material. And you know that birefringent material, if it's lambda over 4 plate, if it's linearly polarized light going through lambda over 4 plate, you will get circularly polarized light. And then if you have lambda over 2 plate, depending on the angle, you will change slightly the polarization and so on. So you can see that when Beth passed circularly polarized light twice through the lambda, or should say lambda here, over 2 plate, which was suspended on torsion pendulum, he achieved angular momentum transfer of 4 h bar. So it was per photon. It was the first measurement ever of angular momentum of light. And then in late 90s, a lot of groups decided that they will remeasure that. And we stumbled over it by accident. We were the first ones to remeasure it. So what did we do? We took birefringent particle. Does everybody know what birefringent particle is? No? Okay, birefringent particle is a particle which has 2 refractive indices, which one in X and one in Y direction. And they are different. So when the light comes, linearly polarized light comes onto it, it travels in the X and Y direction with different speeds, because you know that the speed of propagation goes as C over N, and if N varies, then V will vary. Okay, so they travel not in unison. So if you get a certain phase difference between the two of them on the output, depending how much you get either elliptically polarized light or circularly polarized light. Okay? So we take this birefringent crystal, and an example of birefringent crystal is calcite, and probably some of you have done labs with calcite crystal and looking at 2 spots. When you put light through it, where the 2 spots come through, one follows Snell's law and one doesn't. Anyway, so what we're doing here, I take plain polarized light. I have calcite crystal, which is in water, so it has much greater refractive index than water, and it has quite a big difference between these 2 refractive indices in X and Y direction. Okay, and I trap the particle in 3 dimensions in this polarized light. So what happens is that this particle, so this is my optical tweezers basically, so they either rotate continuously or align to a particular orientation. So in linearly polarized light, they orient themselves according to where the optics axis is, so they follow the linearly polarized light. And in elliptical light, they rotate with frequency, where the frequency can be controlled. So here we go. I take quite large, flat piece of calcite crystal, I put it in the laser light, and what I do is I change my lambda over 2 plate direction of it, and you can see that the particle follows that. So I can align it to my vacuum. And then I can take circularly polarized light. So this crystal is very, very large. It's sort of 3-dimensionally trapped, and it's quite heavy. It's almost 10 microns in size. So it's sort of, when you see that it sort of stops and starts, it's because it's touching microscope stuff. So I got myself rotating thing. Okay, so what can we do with it? Well, should I just skip this? It's too much for you guys. I'll save your attention for nice things. Okay, so what can I do with it? What those 3 slides were showing is the theory. That you can analyze it and you can show what rotation rates you should be using. So basically what you can then do are many different things, but one of them is that you can take this rotating particle and put it close to a cock. And then, as there will be so this particle is rotating in its steerable track, and I can rotate it very fast, and then I bring it to a cock which I have produced in nano fabrication laboratory, like the one you saw here, with double lift-off technique. So this cock here is 9 microns across, and has little bits and pieces cut out of it. And so what I do, I take 2 traps this time. This trap has certainly polarized light and crystal in it, Biophotonics crystal, and this is linearly polarized light with a piece of glass which is cut out, so it's just silicon dioxide. Okay, so here we go. So what we have done here is very old film, very bad quality, but bear with me because it's almost historic. And so here I trap this particle and it's rotating. You cannot see it because it's rotating so fast that you cannot see the rotation of it. It moves the liquid around the particle, and this particle was rotating around it because it wasn't trapped. Here, we were aiming at another experiment, but I was not very careful and trapped both of them together. So this is one axle machine. So there's the crystal, and there's the cog underneath of it. And I put so much power on it, answering your question over there, that I burned part of the crystal, but it's still ready. So this was one axle machine. And then here is what I was depicting in the previous slide, and it is that both of them are trapped. This one, little fellow, is rotating quite fast. It's transferred to the liquid, the rotation, and it goes to the other. So basically we have optically driven micro machines. Okay, they're not very clever micro machines, but they're optically driven micro machines. But the thing is that if you want to, I will stress it again and again, that what I want to do is quantitative measurements. So if I want to do quantitative measurements, I have to have certain shape of particles, which is well known to me, to be able to know how much torque I apply to this particle. And if the particle is funny shapes, irregular shapes, the theory does exist, but it's very cumbersome. However, if I can make those shapes to my liking, like for example spherical particle, then the theory becomes really, really easy, and that's what we were set out to do. So here I show you again the first one that I showed you before. This is calcite crystal produced in a lab, in a wet lab that we did by mistake. We weren't after this calcite crystal, we were after round particles. But in the working of it, we discovered this one as well. But here's my round one. So in our lab, what we did is we devised a recipe. Actually, the recipe existed before, which is employed to produce very small crystals. So what we were after were spherical calcium carbonate crystals. And this is a optical image of one of our particles that we produce. And this is scanning electron microscope image of our particle that we produce. So you can observe a few things in it. It's pretty round, but it has some sort of cauliflower-like structure to it. It has little knobs on it. Okay. And so what we want, as I said, we want them to be round, and I show you the theory for it, and you will see why we wanted them round, because the theory then becomes very simple. And also we wanted them very, very birefringent, because more birefringence, the better they rotate. Okay? So this is spherical calcium carbonate built in the lab. And you can see that this is about 3-4 microns in size. Okay, and we made analysis on it, and we saw that it's really calcium carbonate, and it's called vaterite. So this is excited spectrum of it, and it's pretty clean and shows you that what we have is positive crystal of the same type as calcite, which is negative crystal. But with what it means is that it's a crystal with different crystal structure, okay? But very similar birefringence. And this is how they look. So what's so surprising about them, if I go back twice to this, is this is grown, nucleated from single crystal. Single crystal is not round. However, overall structure can be that round. Not only that, we have measured that this thing is really, really birefringent. How come that the crystal can stick to each other in such a way that the birefringence will be maintained? This sort of suggests that there is very peculiar material structure to it which will allow it to happen. So we looked at it. Yes, it's calcium carbonate. Yes, this is material we are after. People have had much greater ones, and the theory was that they sort of crystallized like this. And eventually, so these are the steps. Single crystals on each other, two little bulbs, then they look like sheets of wheat, and then eventually they grow to this round crystals. But this was for very large ones. Okay, so this was the theory behind them. So then they start growing like this, and then they conglomerate like a sheet of wheat. And then this was our theory. Okay, so what we decided to model was to look at a crystal which could maintain optics axis just because the crystals were growing like this. Now, our interest in it was that we could rotate them very fast, but the little crystals are very non-cooperative, because if you put them in anything else than water, they dissolve. So first we wanted them round, and I've showed the theory, and secondly we wanted them not to dissolve. So once we produced them and characterized them, we said, okay, we want to functionalize them for biological purposes so we can stick with the things to our liking. Okay, and so, because as I said, if you put them to any biological buffer, you could see them under the microscope just dissolving. So there wasn't much use, even if you could spin them very fast in the first second. Okay, so we put an APS layer on them. Then we cover them with another layer of sort of glassy material. And then we put another layer of SPS functionalization. And then if that is done, then the yellow lines, what they mean is that I have encapsulated my birefringent crystal in a glassy structure which is very tight and not porous. And now people know how to attach proteins to this glassy structure. So then you can attach proteins to it and then attach it to DNA or some other things. So this is playing Lego with this sort of stuff. So you have your protein here, and then you can have biotin attached to it, and then you got yourself a biologically related system which can be used for measurement of forces, torques, and anything of the sort. So how do we know it works? We did absorption of fluorescent dye on the spheres. Then we did XPS again to see how the material looked like, to confirm that we had the coating. Then we did scanning electron microscope to monitor surface structure. And then we did our optical tweezers measurements to see that they were birefringent and still rotated. And then we measured lifetime in the buffer, and we could see that they didn't dissolve. Okay, and we did a lot of tests. So here are the results of those measurements. So basically you see the beads here, and they're uncoated, and you can see that they don't take up any fluorescence. When you coat them with, and you have this fluorescent dye in them, you can see that APS coated are definitely visible. So we have done that step. And then you can put another batch of them and have APS and this EOS coating, and then again, nothing you can see without the dye. You put the dye into it, you look at it in fluorescence, and of course in the bright field you don't know which ones are coated and which are not, but here you can see all of them being coated, or partially coated. And then you can, as I said, take those and coat them with the coating. Okay, so this is just a picture to show you that this are our beautiful structures that we can do. There's no use for them, of course. Only this one is usable. This one is a star, beautiful star, but it's not much of use. Okay, and they are very birefringent, and I'll show you that now. And so basically there's my sphere. This is the calcium carbonate sphere, which is trapped in optical tweezers. And I rotate it, and I have two polarizers. Polarizer and analyzer in a microscope, and I illuminate my microscope with the white light. And then I look, when I do it, I look how the picture is changing as the particle is rotating. And if you have done any labs on birefringent particles of any sort, you know that if the birefringent particle is put between two cross polarizers and you rotate the stage, then those funny shapes, like those crosses, will occur. So that's a measure of birefringence, okay? Sorry. I meant to show you, of course, that it works. Okay, so here is the particle being trapped. It rotates. It's very visible, which means that the particle is not perfectly spherical. And now we're rotating it, and you can see that those crosses are being built there. And as we take and enhance pictures a little bit, this is what we have seen. This is trapped now and stopped in the but here you can see the particle cross polarizers. So it's funny stuff that you can grow particles like that, and they will stay birefringent to the extent that you can measure it that easily. But we have proven it's birefringent. So then we thought, okay, we have to show that our model works. So this is this sheath of wheat model, which I showed you before. And this is our modeling, and you can see that this looks pretty much like the previous pictures that I was showing. So we do understand theory of it, we do understand materials, so let's use that now. Okay, so what can I do with it? What's this good for? It's one thing as a scientist to have a lot of fun and measure, do basic research, but sometimes you want to use it for something. Okay, so what we decided to do is to use it for microrheology experiments. What does that mean? Normally, if you want to measure viscosity of the liquid, and if you take very minute amount of the liquid, it's very difficult to do it. Because there's machines which allow you to measure viscosity where you apply shear stress on the liquid, need a lot of liquid. So we thought we would build microrheometer. So what do? We take our λ/4 plate, or our spherical particle, we illuminate it with circularly polarized light, which carries, each photon carries h bar per photon angular momentum, spin angular momentum. And if this is a perfect λ/4 plate, then I should get zero momentum here. Okay? And so if I can measure how much momentum I get after the plate, I can relate it to the viscosity. And why? Okay, let us look at it. So here's my particle, it's being trapped in circularly polarized light, starts rotating, and when it rotates, depending on its size and the liquid around it, the polarization of the light will change, and it will be elliptically polarized. Okay, and degree of polarization can be easily measured with what I do. I know how much power I have in the incoming light, and now I can somehow measure the polarization state of the transmitted light, and then I have degree of polarization. So this is power in left-handed minus power in right-handed circularly polarized light divided by the power of the incoming beam. And this is the setup you need, so it's very simple. I take my λ/4. So this is the light which is transmitted here, and I showed you that on one of the previous transparencies that I can collect with the condenser all the light which is transmitted by the particle, and then if I have all this light, I can put λ/4 plate here, I can put polarizing beam splitter here, split the light into two channels. One will be measuring left-handed, one will be measuring right-handed polarized light, and the power in that, and then I can measure, I can determine the degree of polarization. And then I also have angular, the particle is rotating, so I have angular momentum flux on the particle, and it will be degree of polarization times the power of the incoming light times the frequency of the laser which we illuminated. So then, of course, we know that I have then optical torque imparted on the particle, and there will be the change in polarizations times power divided by the optical frequency of the light. So it's all very simple as long as the particle is round, because now, of course, surrounding liquid reacts to it, and I will have a viscous drag torque acting on it, and viscous drag on a spherical particle has very simple form, because the viscous drag is proportional to the viscosity of surrounding liquid times the sphere's radius cube and frequency of rotation. Now, frequency of rotation I can measure with my oscilloscope if I so want, and then size of the particle is slightly more difficult to determine, but I can tell you in the break how to do it. And so it means that if I can measure the change in the polarization, these two should be equal now, and so that means that I can get viscosity of it. So what does it require again? Change in polarization has to be measured very efficiently. I have to know the power of incoming laser, and I have to I have to know the wavelengths of light with which I'm doing it all, and then I have to know the particle size with quite good resolution, and then how fast the particle is spinning. So this is the setup. It's not very much more complicated than the normal tweezers setup. So I have my normal tweezers. Remember, we had to have two lenses to extend the beam which was coming into objective. I have my objective here, and I have a condenser. And this is XYZ translation stage. And now I can look at the particle rotating here in the scattered light, but I can collect all the transmitted light, and I can now send it to very little part to this detector, which will look at its rotation. So this looks at the rotation. The rest of the beam goes to the lambda default plate, which I showed you before. Beam splitter, polarizing beam splitter, left-handed, right-handed polarized light. Measurement of that. Bingo, I got it all. Okay? So these are real signals. This is not a joke. So this is the the response of this detector. So that's very easy to establish how fast